Have you ever felt like the more available you are, the less respect you get? Like people ignore your presence, dismiss your value, and expect you to be at their beck and call? In this video, we'll uncover how Niccolò Machiavelli's timeless principles show that by withdrawing your availability, you can regain control, command respect, and reshape your power in any environment, personal, political, or professional. In a world where presence is mistaken for power and silence is seen as weakness, the man who removes himself becomes a myth. Today, we dive into the ruthless wisdom of Machiavelli to expose why stepping away might be the boldest step forward. Let me tell you something the world doesn't want you to know. The more available you are, the less powerful you appear. In today's culture, they teach you to be present, always responsive, always there for others. They call it kindness, humility, even leadership. But let's speak plainly. What they call presence is often nothing more than self-erasure. Now think carefully. When was the last time someone truly valued something they had easy access to? A king who walks among the peasants every day ceases to be a king in their eyes. A leader who answers every knock on the door becomes a servant. And a man who is always reachable, always saying yes, is eventually taken for granted, not respected. Niccolò Machiavelli, the political mind behind The Prince, understood this centuries ago. His words cut through sentiment and exposed the machinery of power. He wrote not to please, but to reveal. And what he revealed was this: visibility without scarcity destroys influence. A prince must choose when to be seen. His presence must be calculated, like the appearance of the sun, predictable enough to give order, but distant enough to command awe. When you make yourself too available, you remove the veil of authority. You become ordinary. You become predictable. And worst of all, you become ignorable. There is a cruel truth behind this, one that makes people uncomfortable. Humans respect what they can't easily reach. Let that sit with you. You see, when you're always around, you remove the cost of access. And when there's no cost to reach you, whether it's your time, your attention, or your energy, people begin to assume there's no value in it. What once seemed valuable becomes common. What was once a rare gift becomes routine noise. And here's the silent betrayal: they won't tell you this directly. They'll keep showing up. They'll keep asking for favors. They'll smile, nod, and take. But behind closed doors, your presence has lost its weight. Your opinion has lost its edge. And your identity, it has blurred into the background. You didn't fall from power. You gave it away, drip by drip, message by message, response by response. You were too accessible. Now understand this from a tactical perspective. When a ruler, or even a common man, makes himself constantly available, he is signaling desperation. And desperation, in the world of power, is a stench that never goes unnoticed. It invites manipulation. It invites disrespect. People begin to test your limits. They begin to see how far they can go, how late they can call, how much of your time they can steal. Because if you give freely, they will take freely. And if you never withdraw, they will never chase. Now you may say, but I'm just being kind. I'm being supportive. And perhaps that's true. But kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. Even the most generous ruler must retreat behind palace walls. In fact, Machiavelli would argue that a wise leader never allows his presence to become routine. He must be seen enough to inspire loyalty, but removed enough to provoke speculation. Because once people think they fully know you, they stop fearing you. And when they stop fearing you, they stop respecting you. That's when control slips through your fingers, quietly, without a sound. Availability is not a virtue. It is a strategy. And if it's misused, it becomes your downfall. There is a reason kings retreat into silence. A reason philosophers speak rarely. A reason Machiavelli himself cautioned rulers to let others come to them, not the other way around. Availability is cheap. Scarcity is expensive. And the man who is always around is always overlooked. There is a power far greater than brute strength, greater than loud speeches or visible achievements. It's a power that moves silently, works in shadows, and yet dominates the thoughts of others without ever raising a hand. It is the power of mystery. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this well. He understood that men don't just follow those who are strong. They follow those they don't fully understand. They admire what they cannot access. They respect what they cannot read. And they fear what they cannot predict. When you are too known, too open, too revealed, what happens? You become defined. You become mapped. And once people can predict your moves, your thoughts, and your reactions, they begin to feel superior, not because they are, but because you gave them the blueprint of your mind. You handed them your playbook. But the mysterious man, he is a question mark. He leaves blanks in every room he exits. He speaks little, but his silence screams louder than words. He walks away before he's fully understood, and because of that, he's never forgotten. When people don't know where you stand, they hesitate. When they can't read your face, they adjust their tone. When they're unsure of your intentions, they treat you more carefully. Respect isn't always born from affection. It often grows from uncertainty. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." Those few words hold an entire strategy. You must learn to curate your image, not expose your truth. You must appear to the world in a way that serves your purpose, not in a way that satisfies your need for connection or validation. Because while openness might gain you applause, mystery earns you leverage. The more you explain yourself, the more they categorize you. They decide what kind of person you are. They feel they've figured you out. And once someone thinks they know you, they begin to measure you, and then, inevitably, they begin to minimize you. But leave them uncertain, leave gaps, let them guess. Let them fill in the blanks with whatever they imagine. Because in the absence of certainty, people always assume the most powerful version of you. A man who says nothing in a meeting is often seen as wise. A leader who declines to respond immediately is assumed to be calculating. A ruler who appears briefly, then disappears, becomes the topic of conversation long after he's gone. Why? Because the unknown is magnetic. It is haunting. It lingers in the mind. People become obsessed with what they don't understand, and that obsession, that mental occupation, gives you influence without effort. Mystery forces others to project their own ideas, hopes, and fears onto you. They begin to shape your image in their minds, not based on truth, but based on perception. And perception is the currency of power. Even your enemies will be cautious when they don't know your next move. They'll overthink. They'll hesitate. They'll talk more than they act, all while you remain still, unread, untouched. Now don't confuse this with manipulation. This isn't about lying. It's about limiting access. It's about guarding your internal world with the same precision a king guards the vaults of his kingdom. Because not everyone deserves to know what you think. Not everyone has earned the right to understand how you feel. And certainly, not everyone should be allowed to anticipate your next decision. Mystery is not passive. It's not shyness. It's a conscious strategy. It is the art of saying less to gain more. And the moment people stop being able to read you, that's the moment they start respecting you. There is something strange about human nature. We don't value what we see often. We don't chase what comes easily, and we certainly don't respect what is always within reach. This truth, cold and unspoken, is the root of a power most men never touch: scarcity. Scarcity is not just an economic principle, it is a psychological weapon. One that Machiavelli would have called a quiet force. A force that bends the will of others without a single word spoken. You do not need to threaten anyone. You do not need to shout. You only need to become rare. When you are constantly around, you give the impression that your presence costs nothing. When you constantly respond, you signal that your time is cheap. When you offer your thoughts, your energy, your favor freely, you become a resource, not a force. And in the mind of the masses, a resource is something to be used, not respected. But reverse the roles. Withdraw. Make yourself harder to reach. Decline a few invitations. Let the message wait. and suddenly you shift from being a convenience to being a pursuit. Scarcity makes people pay attention. It raises your price without ever changing who you are. It builds curiosity, tension, and desire. People begin to wonder where you are, why you're not there, why you're not speaking, what you're thinking. That vacuum, that silence, pulls them in closer. Because the mind hates a void, it fills it with fascination. Machiavelli knew that appearances were more important than truth. And in the game of appearances, nothing enhances your image more than selective presence. It is the same reason royalty appears only during ceremony. The same reason generals are rarely seen in the trenches. The same reason philosophers speak through books, not constant words. Your value increases the moment your availability decreases. People begin to compete for your attention. They interpret your time as something valuable, something that must be earned. And here's the real twist. Even those who once ignored you will start to feel the shift. Not because you became someone else, but because your scarcity made them rethink your worth. This is the psychology of desire. People do not chase what they already have. They chase what they cannot touch. It applies in love, in politics, in business, in leadership. When you are always seen, you become background noise. When you are rarely seen, you become an event. One appearance can shift the mood of an entire room, not because of what you say, but because they know how rare it is to hear your voice at all. Scarcity creates anticipation. It makes people listen more closely, value your presence more deeply, and take your words more seriously. It turns you from a participant into a spectacle. And this is not by accident. It is by design. Machiavelli didn't believe in surrendering to emotion or attachment. He believed in strategy, in choosing your moments like a chess master chooses his moves. Deliberately, not emotionally. You do not withhold yourself out of bitterness. You do it to raise your value. You do it to make others meet you on your terms. Understand this: the more people are exposed to something, the more it blends into the ordinary. It becomes routine. It becomes forgettable. But what is rare, what is elusive, lives longer in the mind. A single memory of someone who rarely appears holds more weight than 1,000 encounters with someone who never leaves. Your time, your energy, your words, these are your currency. Spend them slowly. Make people wait. Let them wonder. Let them reach. Because the man who learns to use scarcity never has to beg for influence again. Control is not taken by force alone. It is not always seized with noise or crowned with celebration. Often, the deepest form of control lies in what others cannot touch, cannot influence, and cannot shake. Detachment. To detach is to command without chasing, to lead without clinging, to move through a room without needing to own it. And Niccolò Machiavelli, the master of political perception, understood this better than most. He knew that the man who stands back, calm, untouched, emotionally unavailable, is often the one who silently directs the course of events. Now ask yourself this: when was the last time you saw someone who was immune to flattery, to provocation, to desperation, and didn't feel some level of awe? We are conditioned to respond, to react, to jump when called, to explain when challenged, to defend when questioned. But Machiavelli teaches the opposite. He teaches that power belongs to the man who can remain still while the world burns with noise around him. Because detachment is not weakness. It is control in its purest form. When you detach, you stop responding on command. You stop moving according to someone else's rhythm. You stop being emotionally baited into decisions. People lose their grip on you because they can no longer predict you. They can no longer manipulate you with urgency, fear, or approval. You remove the handles from your personality, and suddenly, no one knows how to move you. There is a coldness in this, yes, but there is also peace. And more importantly, there is power. You must understand that most people are addicted to engagement. They want reactions. They need feedback. They feed off of being seen, heard, acknowledged. So they provoke, they flatter, they push, they guilt, trip. But once you step out of that loop, once you become indifferent to their validation or their drama, you place yourself in a position far above them. Machiavelli would argue the ruler who acts without emotion, who governs with calculation rather than sentiment, secures his throne longer than the one who tries to please or appease. Detachment makes you dangerous, because nothing is more terrifying to the manipulator than someone who can't be controlled. Nothing frustrates the needy more than a person who does not need them back. And nothing confuses the emotional player more than silence in the face of provocation. They expect a reaction. They expect you to beg, to explain, to fight for a place at the table. But when you choose distance, when you choose not to care, you flip the entire dynamic. Detachment gives you leverage. You are no longer ruled by urgency. You are no longer a slave to outcome. You no longer fear rejection, because rejection implies that you were trying to be chosen in the first place. You do not chase, you attract. And if what you want doesn't come, you do not break, you adapt. This is control, and it is control not over others first, but over yourself. You will find that when you detach, people come closer, not because you asked, but because you refused. When you do not need, others begin to want. When you do not move, others begin to adjust. When you no longer seek, you force the world to respond. It is not about arrogance. It is about choosing freedom over emotional chaos. It is about keeping your hand steady while others throw stones. It is about not making your mind a public square for every opinion and demand. Machiavelli believed that appearance could be crafted. But control, true control, begins within. And that control is born the moment you realize that you do not have to engage. You do not have to explain. You do not have to be everywhere, know everything or feel everything. And so the path becomes clear, but it is not the path of the many. It is the path of the few, the ones who understand that power is not found in noise, but in silence. Not in presence, but in distance. Not in being everything to everyone, but in being rare, unreadable, untouchable. You were taught to give freely, to explain endlessly, to remain constantly available. But Machiavelli reminds us, those who are always seen are eventually unseen. Those who are always known are soon forgotten. When you step back, you are not retreating. You are rising. You are shifting from being a participant in everyone else's game to becoming the one who defines the rules. Stop offering yourself so easily. Withdraw your time like a precious currency. Cloak yourself in mystery. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Let them chase. Because when you stop being available, you stop being ordinary. And that, in the eyes of power, changes everything.